both
got
children
it, right?
got it. And my kids are little. They would never have been able to read it. So
Okay.
even my
Okay.
advanced readers would not have been able to read it, thankfully.
Oh, you scared me so bad.
No, but the secretary did. So the secretary got it, and she was like, it was a pill moment for her, a moment of just the scales falling off your eyes and what the heck's happening. And then she shared it with our principal, and our principal called me and said, Carrie, what is this? But they were just like, this is bad. This is really, really bad. It's not a matter of just being kind, just being accepting, just being culturally responsive. It is extremely, I think it's extremely triggering to people who have been through these things actually themselves. And I think it's there is no other word. There is no other word for it than grooming. And I say that as somebody, both Brooke and I were foster parents. So with that, I'm going to let you know, Brooke and I are in this battle here in Utah. Our goal is to protect children at every single level. So today I wanted to put a face to the accusations. Brooke's specialty is she is Laverna in the library. Brooke is about the most joyful, kind, warm, embracing person. I mean, if you just look at her face, she just looks like a person who will just walk up to you and give a stranger a hug. I'm not even that person. So the angle in which this comes from are people who are extremely empathetic, are people who want the very best for children. So on that note, welcome, Brooke.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You were talking about how they read the book, and I just have to say that my husband hasn't read it. My mom was just in town. I did not show it to my mom. Do not show it to family. My friends have not seen it. And it's for people who, it's so dark that, I mean, my husband won't even look. I'm like, just look at this one thing. He's like, no, I won't.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to get into people's minds, especially children who can't handle it, because I can't handle it anymore. And I thought I could. I thought that because I was doing comprehensive sex ed, I was reviewing all those programs in California before I moved to Utah. Actually, like fled from California and said, I'm done with this, like you, who left Washington. And I was absolutely horrified. I was embarrassed to say the words. I was embarrassed to tell people what was in these sex ed programs in California. And then I kept doing it because I wanted to provide a solution. I wanted it to stop, and you have to tell people to do that. So I got used to saying those words. I got used to saying, do you know what this word means? And they're like, I've never heard of that before. I'm like, well, this is what it means. And this is what they're teaching kids. And so it like became part of a normal conversation to talk about this stuff. So it's not like I'm like, oh my goodness,
Right.
Utah. It's like I've seen a lot, and I've looked at a lot, and I came here expecting that I wasn't going to do anything anymore. I thought Utah, Zion, all this jazz.
Safe
And
haven, right? The big
yes,
protection, the big moat of all the crazy.
yeah,
Family-centered Utah, because you expect that your children are going to be safe and that there's nothing that people are going to listen to you if you have any concerns, but you don't expect to have any concerns.
yeah.
And then you get here and you're like, are you competing for California? Are you competing for Seattle? Because some of the things that are in Utah, I honestly have to say, seem worse than I'm seeing in Seattle. At least in Seattle, at least in California, you expect it. In Utah, you absolutely don't.
Yeah. So anyway, so I came and I would read some of these books, and then I would go through and I, help post, and I had no idea what I was doing. Honestly, I got this, the first thing I got was somebody emailed me, All Boys Aren't Blue. And I read that and I'm like, what? This isn't a kid's book? What? And I was horrified, and I like posted it, because I'm on the board of Utah Parents United. And so I posted that, and I'm like, Yeah, that shouldn't be happening. My goal is that people are aware and have a solution that they can work towards so that they're not upset about this crazy anger you don't know what to do with. It's like let's direct that so that we can be productive and try and better society. And so I posted that, and then I went to this conference, and this lady, I sat next to her, and she's like, "Do you know how to search for books?" And I thought, "No, I don't know anything about it." And she's like, "Let me show you." And I'm like, and I had paid for myself to go out to this conference. I paid for my plane ticket, my hotel. And the whole time I went out there, I'm like, I don't think anything's going to happen with this. I hope something happens with this. And that's where I met her. She showed me how to search, and she showed me her list. And then somebody else showed me their list. And I'm like, there are too many lists. And I hate all the chaos of lots of things. So I'm like trying to organize it. So I'm like making sense. And so then I published my list of this books that I'd inherited from various places. And they're like, she wants this gone. I don't even know anything about that book. And they're like accusing me of all this stuff. And then I told my principal on the sly, I'm like, hey, did you know that your school has this book? And I just sent him a little email. I had no idea what book challenges were. And he's like, yeah, we'll take care of it. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm used to being lied to. And so I'm always kind of like, hey, da, da, da. I'm like, wait a second. And so then I sent my neighbor's kid over, and I'm like, hey, see if you can check this book out. I wonder if it's really gone. And it wasn't. And so he found out that the book was trying to be checked. But immediately after that happened, he emailed me and said, oh, I found out you have to do a book challenge. I'm like, okay. And I went through and I put this list that I'd inherited through the thing, and I found that these were in, and they had some information on them. So I'm like, okay, here you go. And I didn't know there would be a challenge process. And, I was just kind of like learning as I went. In hindsight, actually, when the first book challenge that I had that was at the top of my list, I looked at it and I'm like, I'm challenging this book. And so this is embarrassing because, and so I showed up to the book challenge and I prepared all of my information and I researched it. And I actually didn't challenge that the book be removed. I asked that a sticker be placed on it that gave information about transgender. It's kind of like, hey, here's a book that kind of seems to promote it, but if you read this, kind of like a Surgeon General's warning,
Sure, yeah.
that a lot of kids who experience this grow out of it. And if you experience same-sex attraction, that a lot of kids grow out of it, and you don't have to worry about your identity. You just get to be you, or some stuff. I don't even know what it was, but I could give it to you later. But I asked that they just put a little sticker on so kids didn't like feel this pressure to know what their sexual identity was. I was just like, that comes later when you can legally consent to sex. That's age
And
18.
and so what age are these books? Is this for all high school, or is this also middle school as well?
So it was at the middle school, but the book that I happened to challenge, my very first one that I didn't ask to be removed, I asked to put a sticker on it. Um, is there are 75 copies, I believe, in elementary schools in Davis, and there are like 25 in junior highs. And I don't know. And so for me, when I posted about that, I was just like, hey guys, for your kids to be encouraged to determine their sexual identity before they can be sexually active legally is irresponsible. And it puts a lot of pressure on them because they're still trying to figure out who they are as a person, and to worry about their sexuality is it's just adding too much for them. And
Don't you feel like you have a little bit more insight in this, having, I don't know about what it's like in California, but I know in Washington we had to do a lot of foster parent training,
yeah.
and a lot of what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. You had
Mhm.
social workers come and do home studies. And some of these books, I'm like, if these were on our shelves today, and literally, we only stopped fostering 3 years ago.
Mhm.
This would have been, there's no other term for it. I'm not being hyperbolic. It would have been considered grooming to have some of these books in your home. Like, they would have been like, these books can trigger a child. They shouldn't be here.
Yeah, and all that training included knowing what these kids experienced beforehand and what most likely that you didn't even know that you have to be aware of, and how are they going to respond to this, and where can you go for resources. And so, like, it was scary to go through foster care training. I was like, can I do this? Can I really help them? And I have met with countless therapists because we've, tried to undo all of the trauma that happened. And the therapists say that the therapists don't even know how to handle some of this trauma. Like they're at a loss. There are so many that we met and we're like, what do we do? How do we help? How can we, and they're like, we don't know. And I've read so many books, like A Child Called It, and just anything to try and understand the terrors that have happened and experiencing it too, to help undo it. But these books, honestly, even talking about it in a classroom, my daughter would have to leave the class and just
Absolutely.
and tears. And the teacher's like, what happened? I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you guys were going to start talking about whatever they were talking about. And so they began to let her go so she didn't have to cause a scene by running out in tears. And I'm like, these books are not going to help these kids who they say they're going to intend. And the fact that an English teacher, she's actually an English professor out of Darkness, Hope Perez at Ashley, I think it is. But she's defending her book, saying that she is helping these kids and they need this, mirror, this reflection of their experience. And I'm just like, oh, so an English professor is actually a certified therapist who knows how to help these kids. And in fact, Dr. Gary Thompson was at the meeting yesterday with our district, and he said, kids who have been traumatized when they read these books, their parents should immediately be notified and they should have access to a counselor, because that's how triggering these books are. It's very, very irresponsible and ill-informed. And
And does this tie in with the social and emotional learning? I mean, it seems like anything that can other our children, anything that can get our children on a path. And these books do, because they introduce them into things that they would never have known before. Was listening to one principal who was saying, what is age appropriate? Well, they have cell phones, and since they have cell phones, they're exposed to all of this anyways, so we need to just keep the conversation going. I can't agree with that. Like, for one, I don't think that every single parent is like, oh, here's my 7-year-old, let's give them a cell phone and let's, let them have free reign to do whatever they want. And when I say I don't think that and I don't agree with that, I work with first graders. So I work in an elementary school. That is not what most parents are doing. Are there some that have way too much information? Absolutely. But school is not the place to delve into it.
Oh, yeah. And it's such a funny excuse, because it's like, well, they have access to computers. Don't you know this? And I'm like, well, did you know that my kids, everything is locked up in my house? Did you know my daughter can't even use a Gab phone because she gets contacts from other people and doesn't know boundaries? It's not safe. And so now she has a pinwheel phone, which I like a lot more. She has a lot more apps. She plays with it. She's happy. She feels safe. Some kids may be able to handle it. You have to know your kid,
Right.
and you know what they're ready for. And, we've tried different things and it's like, oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. Oh, this didn't work. So it's not like you automatically start on lockdown. You start as a parent and you experiment for where is the health of the child going to be the best. And you really have to take your child where they are. And when people start telling you that you're a bad parent or you're whatever, you're just like, you haven't even spoken with me for 1 second. And so I'm like,
And you get a lot of hate. That's why I was wondering if you even wanted to go by your name, because you get so much hate. It's just like, seriously.
I'm seriously, totally unaware of it. So that's good. So you don't have to tell me anything
Okay,
about
I'm
it.
sorry. Yeah, let's just erase
No.
that.
No, people have told me that, and my name's out there. And one of my purposes is for people to be able to stand up and just say, this is what I believe in. And just like everybody from the left gets to believe in stuff, I can believe that the world is flat if I want. I can believe that, frogs can turn into princes if I want. Like, this is America. This is a free country, and there's no reason for me to be ashamed of what I believe in. And I just love that we have that right to believe whatever we want. And if you can believe that genderqueer is awesome for kids, then I have just as much right to believe the opposite. And for you to tell me that I'm a hater because I don't believe how you believe, dude, you're
Right.
such a hypocrite.
You're authoritarian. The people who believe in empathy and diversity and inclusion really want us thinking all the same way and accepting all the same things. And I can't accept something that can cause harm. That I've seen too many stories of people who've went down a road and within 2 years regret the road that they went down because they were pressured way before they were an age where they should have even been thinking about it. They should have been thinking about what they enjoy doing in life
Mhm.
instead of what collective they belong to.
Yeah.
And that's what these books are doing. That's what our social media is doing. And that's what many, many schools are embracing, is pushing people into collectives. And these books, I mean, we've heard those things when we were younger about like what we put in, what we put in, what we read, what we watch, all of those things. Oh, you remember the little story? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. And it was all about like, be mindful of the stuff that you're putting in. Garbage in is garbage out. Okay. And
Mhm.
I would go so far as to say that teaching elementary kids and middle school, teaching these kids sex when all they're thinking about is the next time they get to play Nerf, it seems abusive. It
Yeah.
seems abusive. And as somebody who's been through all kinds of abuse, I
Mhm.
kind of have to have an eye on what abuse is.
Oh
I,
yeah, for sure.
I'm
It's like you don't even know, you people, like the stuff I know about. Oh my gosh, the stuff that, like, it fires my blood to know what's going on and to know that this was promoted for, like, if you're like, porn is awesome. Okay, do you know where this went? Do you know how far it went? Do you know how many children are damaged? And so it really makes me upset when they're saying, hey, porn's okay, all you 9-year-olds on what was it called? Amaze.org.
right.
And so,
Amaze.org.
yeah, I'm like, You're just pure evil because I've seen when you do this, what happens to kids." It's funny because people were saying stuff about, you're against this and you're against that. And I'm just like, so if I ask you to take the garbage out, you're acting like I'm asking you to burn down your house. Like,
And
answer
let's
that.
be clear, we're not like this thing that we're asking to ban books. In Canada, they burned books. They had a book burning to get rid of whiteness of books. Here, what we're asking is for them not to be in our elementary schools. We're asking for them not to be in our middle and our high schools. We're saying take them to the public library, and parents who think that this is great for their kids, take them there and let them get them. But don't put them in a place where we all feel like our kids should be safe. You're held to a higher standard when you work in a school. When your job is to work around kids, then your job is to protect the children.
And it's book boundaries. And one of the things is porn. So the Miller test was created in 1973 in a case in California about pornography. And that was before they had all these studies and this research and the brain imaging that showed that pornography has the same effect as drug addiction, that it's addictive, that pornography is actually a stimulant. It's not just another genre. Pornography is literally a stimulant. And all of these tests that we're using to measure these books, like the Miller test or PICO, we didn't have that information. It's like cocaine was in Coca-Cola. And then you find out cocaine is really bad for your body. So, hey, let's not put it in Coca-Cola anymore because look what it does to you physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever, all that stuff. Now we know what pornography does to you physically, emotionally, and mentally. And for us to be deferring as if we did not know that information and we're applying an archaic standard that doesn't address the issue that pornography acts like a drug and we are giving it to kids. Because the thing is that if parents are legally responsible for their children, they're financially responsible for any therapeutic things that happen to them afterwards, and the school is giving them an addictive substance, then the parents have to pay for all the therapy afterwards. Then the parents have to pay for anything that happens after with their kid. And so it's just goes against parenting to say, hey, do you mind if I just give your kid a little bit of cocaine? They might get addicted, you know?
And
But
why do you think they're doing it? What do you think is the reason that they're doing this?
I do think that there are people who they just have bought into the conversation that, we need to be diversity, equity, inclusion, blah, blah, blah. We want to be empathetic. We want to be, nice. And I believe that it's been spelled out so much that people truly believe that that is what they're doing and that's what they want to do. And they have sincerity. And I'm not saying they're evil people. But the end result is that kids are being sexualized and groomed and turning from the traditions or beliefs of their parents. And there's a wedge being driven into their in between families, and the state is inserting themselves and saying, we know what's best for your child. Biden actually came out and say it. And when the state comes out and says, you know what, we know what's best for your triggered child who has experienced sexual trauma, we actually need to go and say this in front of a whole class when there's no therapist present. And that's when you're like, okay, so you kind of think you're the parent now, and that I have no idea what to do. So thank you very much for stepping in, and they don't. So there's kind of this, I know more than you mentality. And they do know in a lot of different ways, but whatever, backseat, I'm the parent. So
No, I do think that it comes down to wanting our kids to be part of a useless class. And I'm not afraid to say it. They want our kids to be so consumed with self, whether that's pleasure, well, pleasure in various ways, whether that's pleasure of video games, pleasure of sex, pleasure of food. My 14-year-old literally said, Mom, have you noticed that while all the food prices are going up, junk food stays down? And I was like,
whoa.
I did not notice that, but he did. But the othering of our children and the distraction, the constant distraction. I mean, our phones, they're massive distraction. I think it's intentional. And I think I had heard something, well, the slogan, love is love, right?
Yeah.
And so I heard this idea, but what kind of love? Is it agape love? Is it love from a higher being? Is it eros, the sexual love? Because if it's a
Oh.
sexual love, that's always been forbidden. Even in Greek
Mm,
times, it's always been forbidden.
mm.
Children weren't supposed to participate in that, young children, but yet we want our kids in the youngest ages. So what I always try to ask people is, what solutions are there? Like, if they want diversity, equity, and inclusion, true diversity, true equity, true inclusion, how do we meet that? I can understand why families would want their children reflected. When I was a foster parent, and actually all throughout my son's life, I've had books that represented other cultures.
Oh yeah.
Like I think it's important. I think that that's the best way to fight racism, actual racism.
That
Is
was
for them.
actually my master's thesis. What at UMass Boston was how to teach about different cultures without using your own perspective. It's how to study yourself simultaneously as studying other people and seeing yourself as an enculturated being instead of having this otherness perspective of like you're another person. And so I actually love studying other cultures, other perspectives. And so I think it's funny how people label me because I'm just like, well, you kind of have no idea. So get on with your bad self. And I just had to say that I absolutely, when I was saying, what's the goal here of pushing this, that I love my kids' teachers and they're amazing. And they have got my kids to want to be school teachers. And so I know that these generalizations or these big pictures are just, we're all just individuals, and to get to know the person standing in front of, I've gotten hate too because my kids are Black, and so they're like, oh, she's abusive because she won't teach them. I mean, the Salt Lake Tribune was like, she won't teach them about slavery. I'm like, oh, how about you just come to hear what I was teaching my daughter yesterday? It's like so bizarre.
There's a huge difference between teaching your children, like all of the cultural differences, and teaching them an ideology, and also teaching them to be victims, especially when they've come out of the foster system. It is so easy to embrace resentment.
Yeah.
So the work it takes to build in someone something that they can build upon and become a
Mhm.
productive member of society, when their go-to is it's unfair,
Right.
is work that is absolutely unacceptable for
Mhm.
a school district to say that you must dismantle.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yes, you're right. You know your kids and you've been through a lot with your kid, and for somebody else to come in and to say, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The things that they've said, because I've seen it multiple times. Oh, Brooke is a racist. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
her children are black, right? Like all of them. And what's cool about her is she doesn't sit and use them as a token. She's not the first person. We have been on this call for 30 minutes and it's not the first thing that comes out of her mouth, and when it does, it's just a natural thing. It's not, by the way, I've adopted 2 black children, so why don't you give me a lot of money for diversity, equity, and inclusion? You
I
know who
know.
I'm talking about if it ever gets to you, sir. I did go there.
I know. But the reason I brought it up is because what I tell my kids is I said, because they've told me incidents, things that have happened to them, I'm like, oh, that was racist. That right there was racism. So I'll point it out to them and I'll explain it. And I'll be like, and this is because they don't know who you are. And you go up and you introduce yourself because they need to meet more people like you. They need to remember that when they see somebody face to face, that they say, hi, my name is Max.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
everything that you thought about me is all in your pretty little head right there. And you just say, my name is Max. Nice to meet you. You think you've met me before because you had this experience way back here. And now I'm projecting on you. And it's like, that's why all these people who are hating on me, who I don't even know who they are or what they say happily. I'm just like, well, hey, let's go. I've even invited somebody to lunch. I couldn't go because something came up. And I was just like, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. If you sound like you need to be heard right now. And so, like, if you need that, I can listen to you. But you
Say you're far
obviously,
more empathetic, because I'm just like, yeah, as soon as certain things come out of your mouth, I'm like, so tired of
yeah.
people immediately thinking that I'm part of their collective, immediately, and just wanting to all of this stuff. I don't buy into this.
Mhm.
And I can listen to you to a certain point, but when you start quoting critical race theory, when you start quoting Kimberly Crenshaw, when you start saying, oh, we're not teaching CRT, but we want our children to know all the points of intersectionality, then I'm going to go, yeah, so you're teaching CRT, and I'm not
Mhm.
interested in any of that, because I know where it comes from, because I've done my research, I've talked to immigrants, I know the real stories of history, I know what these people have lived and what they're deathly afraid is on our front porch. So nothing that you say about your guilt when you're making $8,000 a month to find racist problems in our schools is going to change my mind.
Mhm.
And I can't. I've just gotten to the point where you have to prioritize your mission. And so,
Mhm.
and my mission is not to win over hardcore ideologues. It's
Mhm.
just not. My mission is to educate as many parents as I can and to put up a wall around the kids. And if the kids have to be indoctrinated in our schools, and I would agree, I don't think most teachers want to do it. I
Yeah.
think many teachers are being slow boiled into it.
Mhm.
You go in, oh, but you're the experts. Remember that. You guys are so tired and so exhausted, and you need the support. That's all parents should be there for, is the support while you lift up their kids. You are the one who knows how to make the future. That's kind of the monologue that I hear um,
Well,
in the teaching world.
yeah, and when I was getting because my master's was in the Graduate College of Education at UMass Boston, and so one of the books, it was called Lies My Teacher Told Me. And it was all about how American history hasn't been taught accurately, and we need to teach them. And, Abraham Lincoln was really this way, and we've been portraying him this way. And I thought it was really interesting because my degree was actually in critical and creative thinking. And so to take in all of the different perspectives and how do you make sense of it and stand in ambiguity at the same time. And that was really difficult to like work into my psyche and be like, hey, I'm okay with ambiguity. Just keep learning, make the best decision with what you know now and go forward and change as you get more information. And so it was like really life altering, and I loved the program. And I thought it was useful to say, hey, yeah, let's teach about the real way that Abraham Lincoln was so we can learn, but not in a disparaging way of the nation, of the country. And that's part of the problem with CRT is it's like, let's get rid of this system because this dude wasn't perfect, And so it's just such an odd concept that we expect perfection of people or they're canceled. And it's so anti-human. And, it's just goes against our natures. And so even though I saw the benefit of teaching how people overcome their difficulties, because I thought that could be very empowering to people if done in the right way. I also felt I know better because my teacher taught me this way, but now I know the real way to teach it. I can see why, no, I actually know better than what you've been doing, and we need to do it this way. So I know you think that this is okay, but I learned the real way.
It's that whole Michelle
Malicious.
Obama, when you know better, you do better. I do agree with critical thinking. I do agree with going to the ugly parts of history. People who don't want the ugly parts at all and want it to be rose-colored glasses. Well, that's how we get into the problems of denial that we're facing today, I think,
Yeah.
on both sides. Because if you look at where these behaviors, where these things that have already been tried elsewhere, if you look at South Africa, fully adopted Marxist practice
Yeah.
and the whiteness, the anti-whiteness, and went out and killed farmers. They went out and killed the farmers and took their property, but they didn't even know how to farm.
Mm.
So you get these situations where you're like, tell the truth, tell what really happened there.
Yeah. And
People need to understand that. I've said this before, but I don't believe that the Nazis woke up one day and were like, I hate my neighbors. I think that they were taught to fear them. And we need to know that teaching people to fear each other, teaching people to hate each other. I've never experienced so much hate in my life, not even like personally experienced it, because I'm pretty sheltered still. But just watching the rest of the world,
mhm.
watching social media, I see so much that I'm like, you literally hate this person that you've never met because of all of these preconceived notions. I had a social worker who told me that if I would just trust her, things would be better. And when I told her that I was conservative, she said, well, studies have shown that people who spank their children don't have good outcomes with their kids, and just went off on this thing. And I'm like, why are you assuming that I spanked my child? Like, and she's like, well, I learned this in school.
I know. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you just go, what are you talking about? And
Yeah.
so going back to books and going back to the solutions for books, I brought up some books that I thought showed the slave experience, didn't gloss over it, were written by Black authors. Books like ones I
The
recommended.
Elijah book, you recommended it and I read it
Yes,
with my kid.
Elijah of Buxton. Elijah of
Yeah.
Buxton and the Madman of Piney
We
Woods.
read that one too. Loved it.
Both of those books, they're
Yeah.
like they're poignant, they're hilarious at times.
Yeah.
And they leave you with a sense of hope. And
Hmm.
these are books about people who are freed or escaped slaves
Yeah.
and who went to Canada and started their own, which I guess that could sound like it's pro the whole segregation movement, which I'm not, but they started their own community and they did very well, and they continue to do very well today in Buxton, Canada.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just feel like that there are solutions to these books. Wonder teaches empathy without ever having to go down a road. I mean, you have a kid who wears a helmet on his head.
Oh yeah.
because he's so deformed.
Hmm.
And eventually he gets to the point where he can take the helmet off because people have learned to accept him for all of his greatness. And it didn't matter. And
Hmm.
that's the same thing, that the message that I would much rather get out there. I don't care if you're gay. And I don't mean that in an I'm not compassionate that you're gay. I mean, I don't care any more that you're gay than that you have greenish, grayish eyes, maybe from what I can see.
They're
I'm like,
blue spray.
okay, like I don't care about that. I care about whether or not you are a good person. And I don't want you to drain the energy out of the room, which you're going to have a bunch of narcissists by the time we get through reading everything needing to be around them. Everything has to be centered around them, especially the minorities, centered around the minority experience. Davis County or Murray County, anyways, a school district has said that they're going to center around the minority. That is going to cause a lot of resentment, and it's going to cause kids to have, in my opinion, they're going to have inflated egos. They're going to think only about their needs and that they are the most important. And it's going to look like Evergreen College. That's what I don't want.
Yeah.
That is what I'm standing against, because those people, I can't even imagine, even in their profiles, it's all of their mental health issues as if it's a badge of honor. And it's like, it's not a badge of honor. A badge of honor is overcoming them. A badge of honor is still being able to do something with your life, regardless of the fact that you've been through a lot of trauma. It
Hmm.
seems to me like the goal is to get our kids convinced that they've been through every kind of trauma that there is. And those who haven't, well, then you need to be allies. And when you become allies, you usually embrace a lot of this kind of othering. So, and I feel like it's coming at them from every angle. So it comes from them in the classroom, right? With the social and emotional learning, with the surveys, with
Hmm.
the correct answers being very politically driven, it seems.
Yeah.
And then for their rest and relaxation, they go into the library and are somewhat bombarded. I mean, I know that there's other books that are the good books in the libraries, but they're not highlighted from what I've seen.
Yeah, they're not. You have to know how to find them and where to find them. And what discourages me a lot is like these books that my daughter loves are the graphic novels, and she loves them. And she'll like, "What's this word, Mom?" I'm like, "This is the word, but it's actually spelled wrong in your book. And on purpose, these words are spelled wrong." And I'm like, this is not cool, because how's she going to learn to spell if the book she's reading isn't even spelled right? And I know it
Why?
might be funny, but she can't discern that yet because she's little. She
Yeah.
can't, she'll be like, "I spelled it right." And I'm like, "No, actually, that word is spelled wrong." And I'm like, crap. I don't know. I mean, it's funny how people have really gotten afraid of it. And I think fear is driving so much. They're like, "So because you want pornographic books out of schools, then you don't want books about the Holocaust. Can we still have, during the legislative hearing, they're like, can we still teach about the Holocaust? And can we still teach about this?" And I'm sitting here like, what? Where did that even come
It seems to me like everything that they tell you is the opposite of what they're really saying. Like
from?
this, it's ridiculous to say. It's sort of like saying the whole totally different thing, but the whole like Roe versus Wade, reversing that, and now then they're going to want to not allow gay children in classrooms,
Yeah.
and
It's like, what?
get rid of the Loving versus Virginia bill. And I'm like, it's ridiculous. And not only is it ridiculous, but you are the people who want to do this.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, like growing up, I read so many Holocaust books. I went to the concentration camps in Germany. I was fascinated with a people's ability, an individual's ability to survive such terrible conditions, the overcoming of the human spirit. And I love that book, and to stand up and see when there's something wrong and say something in the face of such pressure. And I love being able to do that, actually, because those are my heroes. And the book Coming Out of the Ice, by it was truly a banned book. All the Russians bought it up. It talks about the horrors of the Gulag in Russia. and I tried to buy the book. It was $300 on Amazon. And just recently it was $50 so I could buy it. It is so horrific. I would never, I don't even recommend it to adults, but it's so important to understand that history. And it's like, it still lives in my mind, but I'm just like, this man was amazing to live through it. So it's not like I'm against these horrible books, but for children who can't process it, who have been through things, and especially when they're pornographic and they could be addicted for life, that it's so irresponsible to not have the parent at least sign a slip to say, hey, this book has explicit sexual things in here. You need to sign it for the parent to know, because the parent knows, can my kid handle it or not? They can choose. And to take the parent out of their equation when they're the one that will have to be paying all the bills to help them get through whatever
Right.
trauma they went through is just not the place of the state. So they can make up whatever they want. It's just kind of like to get us divided and have fear, and people are scared. It's not necessarily even the people's fault who are screaming and calling me hateful or whatever it is. It's like that's what they've been told, and maybe it is scary if, like there's a Nazi lady somewhere who wants to burn books and we're all going to die, and like if that's what they believe, that's scary.
It is scary.
So
The saddest thing is that they've been taught to not open their eyes. The saddest thing is that there are people going door to door and saying, go talk to your neighbors, let them know what these people want to do. There's a particular group that is literally telling people, go talk to your neighbors, tell them who these people are, how hateful they are, that they want to ban books. I've had several teachers go, are you part of the group that wants to ban books? And then I explained, no, I'm not. And now I explain, no, I'm not. And here's what we actually have,
yeah,
and
look at the binder.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that it's important that people start to open up their eyes, because what happens, and especially with the culture here, is people want to assume goodwill. And I
Mhm.
think that when you see a certain amount of stuff, I understand that. I want to assume goodwill. I want to live in a world of happy flowers and unicorns too. We can't anymore. That's not the world that we live in.
I
So
still assume goodwill though.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't, when you go to the school boards and you say, hey, I have this information and all I want to do is educate you. Will you just talk to me? And they ignore you. Then I can't. And especially not when the next month out comes SEL, or out comes them talking about in their meetings that they want diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they believe that embracing all of this stuff is a good idea. Then I no longer assume goodwill, because if you're too ignorant, once people come to you and say, just chat with me, just go to brunch with me and hear what I have to say. Here I am, a person of color, one of the few out here. Just listen to what I have to say. And then once you have the information, if you make your decision, then I can make a more informed decision myself. But when you won't even respond and the info is out there, then it's hard for me to assume goodwill. And I cannot assume that you've got the best interest for my child, for the children that I am responsible for in my classroom, for my nieces and my nephews. I cannot assume that when there's so much evidence that this is damaging, that this is really, really going to harm a lot of people, that in a few years, a lot of these kids who are going down a certain track are going to resent it and resent the people who created it. Then they're really they're going to embrace some critical resentment theory, as I call it, because they're going to be like, why did you let this happen to me? I think one of the most powerful things that's recently happened to me is I was in a grocery store just chatting it up with my clerk, and she was like, oh, you look like a teacher, because I was wearing teacher clothes. And I was like, I am. And she started talking about her high school, local high school. And she said, I get in trouble all the time because I stand up to certain things. And I was like, just be careful. There's so much stuff and there's so much division. She goes, oh, I know. She was like, they say that it's all about inclusion, but all I can see is it's dividing us more. She said, I'm not afraid to stand. What I'm wondering is why are parents afraid to stand? We say, I would take a bullet for my child. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my kids. But yet we won't stand. Parents don't stand. They go, oh, I really can't handle that. I mean, I know it's out there and it's just too much to think about. And it's our
Well,
kids.
yeah, I think what happened, well, we had a 5-part series class, which you taught last summer. It was awesome. And one of the parents there said, it's too late for my daughter in her 20s. I'm here for my other daughter. And so what can I do? Because I can't. And I was like really floored because there was so much sorrow in what could she have done, and she didn't know this was coming. And I mean, one of my favorite things I'm starting this summer is the Homefront Project, for families, and to start talking with your kids about it. Because in chapter 22 of Kimberly L's book, The Invincible Family, it talks about how the families in, I forget which country, but like Romania, let's say, the families were, kids would go and get indoctrinated in schools. And every night the parents would teach them in the cellar where nobody could hear the true history of their country, of the heroes, and of their religion. And so that's how the parents and the kids survived, is those nightly conversations in the cellar. And so we've actually developed questions, bedtime questions, and they're to get to know you. But then you talk about these values and standing up and being honorable, and it's basics. But how do you combat when they say that women are oppressed, and you're like, well, actually there's more women in college now, and blah blah blah, and it gives you the facts to talk to your kids about that. And so it's not scary. I mean, it is scary if you're not proactive, but if you're having these conversations with your kids and you're building warriors. My son would send me little pictures of stuff because they're aware, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I think this is what they're trying to say. But it doesn't really matter. It's that conversation that you get to have about it. What are they trying to say? Are they teaching you this? How come you were afraid about it? What is behind it? Let's learn about it. And so we really have a great opportunity to get one-on-one with our kids and say, hey, we are in a great country. You get to stand up and say whatever you want and be proud of it. And all the shame and hate they're throwing, that is irrelevant.
It's on them.
That has nothing about who you are or where you are. And this fear is trying to divide you. So, whatever,
I love you. You have so much sass. You're like, but it is true. I was reading the book Live Not by Lies. And it's about Russian dissidents. Oh, it's Russian dissidents. It's by Rod Dreyer. And it's the same kind of thing. How did they survive? And I think that this is how we counter the culture. We counter the culture by having these conversations. And I love that meme that is like, be a rebel, get married, have a family, love Jesus, and it's just like, yep, sounds like a plan. I'm like, if that makes us terrorists, well, guess I'm on the watch list. That's which is ridiculous, because it's like, I literally want to be left alone and to raise my family to have hope and joy. Period. That's all. That's all. And the things you want to do, taking away the fact, I don't want my son to live in a basement and, eat Cheetos and watch porn. That is not the life I want for him. I'm sorry. I know I'm extremely blunt. That makes me controversial. But it's the reality. It's like, those are not the things that I want for my child. And I don't think anybody, when that brand new baby is born, is like, yes, please give them Cheetos and porn. Like that's not what we think. We think we want the world for our kids.
Yeah.
And that world is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller as we become more and more global and less sovereign. I'm glad that you've got this. So is this a thing with UPU, this Homefront?
Yes, it's
That's
so
awesome.
great.
That's awesome.
It was developed by
No.
It was developed by United Families International. And so you can go on their website and see it, and see the Homefront Project Kids. It's on the website. You can download it. There are local groups. You meet with moms and you talk about topics, but it takes you all the way through everything from the very beginning, to understand it with your kids, and not just be like, hey kids, we're going to talk about being transgender right now. And you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? It leads up to it, and you get to like, it was so fun to read the Johnny the Walrus book with my kids and have that conversation naturally and springboard into it. And he's like, yeah, mom, my friend said you can be part girl and part boy. And I was like, nah, no, your body and your spirit's male or female. And, people are thinking that tendencies or dispositions or likes and dislikes and your friends determine your sexuality or your
Well, and
gender.
there are a few, right? I mean, there are a
It
few.
intersects.
It is super, super rare. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just, anything that they can do to grasp and to make us all break up into these groups, they're
Yeah.
going to do. But I just love that they're warriors. I love that there are people who, like me, we never sleep.
No.
I am, we are who's going to stop this. And I do believe we will. We may not win at the voting booths. I don't know. I don't know that that's possible. But I believe that in our homes, as long as we
Yeah.
say, not in our
Yeah.
homes, not in our schools, not in
Right.
our communities,
Right.
and we start to build that community around us, as long as we do that, our kids are going to be okay.
And honestly, I don't care about, I don't mean this to sound bad, but like people who are over 18, if they're going to have surgery and be transgender, or if they're gay or whatever, it's like, hey, you're over 18. It's your life. You get to choose what you want to do. But don't groom my kid. Don't sexualize my kid. Let them grow up and then they can decide.
Let them figure it out for themselves, which is
Yeah.
far more. I mean, I guess the thing is that we're not the authoritarians here. We, the party, the party of extremists, we're not very extreme. We're like, leave us alone, live your life, be a decent person, leave our kids the blank alone.
So,
yeah. And for me, it's more about the spiritual. Like, don't take my kids down a road that's going to make them so miserable that they have no hope.
yeah.
I'm not okay with that. I
Right.
will never be okay with that for any child, because hope is how you survive.
Yeah.
It is. And I
You
know
know.
that as someone who's been through a lot. So,
Yeah.
but I'm so grateful that we've had this time to converse and to kind of shed a light that no, people, we're not trying to burn books. So we just want to protect our kids. And I'm so grateful that you're in the fight, because man, it can feel like you're the only person, a lot of the time.
One of my favorite things about this is to see all the good people like you who are standing up, who I get to work with. It's so encouraging. It's like invigorating, and to see that good and have the opportunity to stand up and say, hey, this is what I believe in. It's fine. Just like you get to believe what you believe, but don't mess with my kids. So.
Right. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Don't mess with our kids.
Yeah.